So today we are talking to Miss Sarah Armstrong Jones. She is an autism consultant, coach, and researcher who has some really powerful insights and tips, especially about autistic people who are still gaining skills to type or speak. She has a lot to say on her website, and I wanted you to this is what she says about it. So imagine a child trapped behind a soundproof door, desperately trying to communicate, but no one can hear them. On the other side, the parents are pounding with bloodied fingers and hands trying to break through. At TLC Autism, we give families the key to open that door, allowing parents to finally hear what their autistic child has been trying to say and help that child feel truly understood for the first time. She says that she specializes in breaking down communication barriers between neurotypicals and autistic people. So I am Melinda Mullen, and we are trying to find ways to reach our message out to help more families that have this situation today. Um, Miss Sarah, what kind of tips do you have for families and caregivers that have kids that are having problems with speaking for meaning and struggle to type?
Well, for starters, I think it's really important to, whenever possible, sit on a person's right side. And this can have a calming effect and allow the person who is autistic to focus better. This is because if you're on someone's right side, the hemispheres in the brain are the opposite, surprisingly. So if you're on their right side, you're stimulating their left hemisphere, which is about logic and facts. If you're sitting on their left side, you're stimulating everything about emotion and creativity.
Mhm.
Um, so that can be a great starting point, and it requires no training. There's no known harm to sitting on a person's right side. So it's a great thing to just start to practice and see if that really works with your kid. And another tip, um, a lot of people who are neurotypical become very uncomfortable because someone on the spectrum can be avoiding eye contact and going something like this. And people who are more toward neurotypical really want some kind of eye contact as a way of grounding themselves. It can be very disorienting and it can make them feel left out. However, um, a person on the spectrum is trying to be social and trying, if especially if they're in a room with you and all the doors are accessible and you're not in any way restricting them leaving the room, if they stay in the room, they want to be with you. And the other way that they show they want to be with you is by avoiding eye contact. And that's because for some people who are autistic, it's really hard to hear and see at the same time. So I'll just sort of give a demonstration. If I'm autistic and I'm going more like this in order to hear you, as soon as I follow your instructions to engage and make, so that meant all my hearing became in the background and wasn't functioning and wasn't taking in what you were saying. And
So is that kind of like a sensory overwhelm where you can only do one modality at a time, especially if
that
it's an overwhelm?
the research I've done seems to indicate that. And what I did, just to give some context for research, I did a case study, and it was with a person who had had severe impediments with speech or typing. They spoke 3 words at the age of 9, and they then could not come out with coherent speech after that, after saying 3 words. And they were unable to type until they were 12 years old. And by the time they were in their late teens, they could say, with speaking for meaning, simple, short sentences. So, and they're now in their late 50s. So, this gives you an idea of what they went through to get speech. And they were sort of like a gateway or a portal into this whole world. And then I thought, um, well, what if this is just a miracle, like some really exceptional case, like an Olympic athlete, like nobody else is going to get this. And someone suggested that I look at first person accounts. So I started reading memoirs and autobiographies that were published books by autistic authors. And there were so many correlations that I really started to see some patterns that showed me that this was not just a freak or a very unique situation in terms of what was involved with gaining speech and typing and who these people were and how they interpreted the world. And it really felt to me, I know we talk about autism as a disability, but to me, what really seemed to emerge from this research was that it was an entirely different culture,
Mhm.
right down to word order and language.
So
Um,
speaking of typing, if anybody has any questions, you can go ahead and raise your hand or put a question in our chat. So you were saying it's kind of more of a culture than it is just a neurodivergency. It has its own way of existing in the world across more than just a couple of case studies. This sounds like it's more. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, one of the things that has been going on for years is that people have a lot of stigmas attached to facilitated communication. And what I learned through my case study and through learning about other people's experiences emerging and being able to communicate with neurotypical people was that some people on the autism spectrum have so much sensory flooding that they uh, experience kind of a form of maybe perhaps PTSD. And they start developing coping mechanisms like the one I just described, where they disengage with their eyes. And with facilitated communication, the worry has consistently been, no matter what, that if you're doing things like pressing on a person's arms so that they're kind of going back into their body, their proprioceptive awareness, if you're doing anything to hold their hand to point, um, perhaps you're just a desperate parent or caregiver, perhaps you're a desperate therapist, and you just are projecting and making them communicate things you wish they could say.
Like operating a Ouija board.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
that is exactly. And but autistic, at least some autistic people, especially those who emerge later with communication that neurotypicals can relate to, um, actually have a very different word order in terms of their spontaneous language.
Mhm.
And I then came across a study from Italy that really blew my mind. And it turned out that people in Italy who were autistic and only typing also had the same kind of pattern. They spoke or typed Italian, but it was in a different word order. And it was very consistent with what people speaking English or typing in English were doing.
Hmm.
And I found multiple examples of it in English. And this study involved multiple cases or multiple individuals who also were only able to type and were typing in a different word order. And that was even if they were facilitated. And going back to stuff like accommodating somebody, like when I talked about avoiding eye contact so you can hear, um, to one of the things that I learned is that many people who are autistic do a tremendous amount to accommodate neurotypical people. And it can be utterly exhausting, even if they can speak for meaning, to rearrange their word order constantly so that they can fit in, so they're not ostracized, so they don't stand out as a target. And just imagine if you're typing or speaking all day and having to totally adjust in some very non-intuitive, awkward way how you're typing or speaking so that someone you really love or depend on, like a parent or a caregiver, can understand you and not keep correcting you and whatever. And but this also led to, when I was doing the case study, having a much deeper understanding of what people were trying to share about their autism. Because you have to remember, it's sort of like neurotypical English is a second language to them. And autistic language, English language, is a second language for neurotypical people. It's different. It's really different. And we're going to take a break at the half hour, and maybe at that time, I'll grab an example to read out loud to you of how people on the spectrum speak. So, anyway, one thing is that if you want to begin typing with someone and they're not speaking for meaning and they're not typing, there may have to be some tactile engagement for them, because the sensory flooding is making it very hard for them not to tune out.
Mhm. And you had said something about using, because a lot of families have like this fear of too much technology, which I understand completely. Here we are on technology, however, utilizing it as a tool. But you had said something to me about utilizing iPads and technology and not just like physical stuff, because the screen might make it easier. Could you talk about that? Because these tips for parents can be so helpful.
Yeah, many people with autism who struggle with speaking for meaning or typing have, they can, it's really ironic, they test normal for hearing and vision, but they have challenges, and usually vision and hearing tests are done in a very standardized but very limited way. You're not taking a hearing test in the middle of a room full of people with the radio in the background. You're taking it in a quiet, calm room with special headsets on and certain tones and all of this sort of thing. But in the real world, there are cognitive things going on that limit in some ways or change in some ways the way an autistic person might be hearing. Um, and same thing with seeing. So, as I explained before, like the lack of eye contact means they're actually able to hear, and as soon as they look at you. So, the one exception for that, for many people, is an iPad, a smart tablet, a phone, a television set. And that's because um, those devices have what's called pixelation. It's very tiny dots. And a lot of people who struggle with communication that can accommodate neurotypical people, uh, anytime something moves, it breaks into dots and dashes and blurs, sort of like my background. But imagine it with everything breaking up. Imagine my face. A person at this part of autism may have a very narrow range of view. Um, they're having everything break up into dots and dashes. They can't see accurately, which is, when I say see accurately, their seeing doesn't sync up with the seeing of neurotypical people. But as soon as they get on to a television set, viewing a television set or a computer, a smart pad, a cell phone, an iPad, their vision links up and syncs up with the way neurotypical people see. And besides the whole thing of the tiny dots or pixelation, you're looking at 2 dimensions instead of three, and there's way less visual information. The other thing with some devices, you can actually have the option to make your whole screen black and white. So now you not only are seeing something in 2 dimensions versus three, but you're seeing it without having to process all the colors.
Mhm.
And animation can be much simpler to look at. You can just think of a television series like The Simpsons, and it's visually very simple.
Mhm.
So you're not having to process so much information where you don't have a filter to sort it all out in real time. And so this allows people suddenly to be able to see and hear at the same time. And it also allows them to start doing sensory integration with touch. Because a lot of times, let's say someone's typing on a board. This has got the ABCs, or you're at a keyboard. The person may look at the board because they're trying to find where the letters are. But in order to actually organize their body to touch, they have to look away. So now, and they're touching with one finger. I can tell you that if you're trying to type with one finger, whether you're neurotypical or neurodivergent, if you cannot look at the keyboard, you're guesstimating where
It's
you're
not too
typing.
overwhelming. When
Yeah,
is that when it's a physical board, or if that is that when it's a like a TV or iPhone,
Um,
iPad?
it's a physical board.
Mhm.
It's much better on a pixelated screen, and it can help on the screen for some people, depending on the degree they are struggling with their body and communication. It can help to put a fitted device, like a clear plastic device, over the screen. I mean, over the screen or over the physical keyboard, where once your finger goes into a letter, it's contained in a little pocket.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah, like if this is a completely, sorry, this is what I've got. If you've got a completely flat board,
Hmm.
um, there's no texture or anything to differentiate, so it's all visual.
Hmm.
And so it's better to use a keyboard. At least you have some feeling. What's even better than that, though, is to have a keyboard on screen because the you can also do different settings to do things like um, have self-correcting spelling or um, other options where if the person's finger is resting on a letter, it just doesn't type all the way across the screen and start on the next line, is keep going. So there are things like that that you can tweak that'll help the person type more accurately, but they're also able to see and touch and hear at the same time. And the other thing that does, which is I think so critical for starting all the process of typing and talking, is that uh, because neurotypical people feel so left out, suddenly you have a dynamic called joint attention. And you can think of a triangle. The focal point is the technology device, whether it's a TV set or a computer screen or what have you. And at the top of the triangle, on this side is the caregiver or parent, and on this side is the person with autism. And they're both focusing on this and sharing and engaging about it. And and they're building or completing something together. And apps that are free or cost like a couple bucks, like for toddlers, are actually incredibly helpful because they might be something like where you touch a piece of fruit and try to move it into a basket with your finger. So now you're using fine motor, which is all about pointing and typing. and you're dragging a piece of fruit into a basket, if you miss on an app, like say on an iPad, it just pops back to the left and you can try again.
Mhm.
Doesn't fall off the table
Yeah.
or, there's not a sense of failure. There's a sense of trying and
Mhm.
of getting to succeed. And people can have really big breakthroughs with that.
And
So
it improves that fine motor and it improves the targeting. I love that. Does anybody have any questions? Because this is like, for me, at the very first time I learned about this with Sarah, I was just like, this helps so much because every time, even though I have a child who speaks quite a lot, this actually kind of opens up my eyes to one of the reasons why she loves animation and why she loves that triangulated, like we are sharing, we are penguin pebbling, and we're both watching the screen because it's less overwhelming to watch the screen, because when I talk about her or we talk about things, it's overwhelming. But if we're talking about a screen, that's a lot easier to talk about. So does anybody have any questions, comments?
I will just say that I appreciate, Sarah, when you say, and some people this and some people that, and it's really about um, tailoring to the individual and where their parameters are and what works for them. And all these things are true and important. And also, it's sort of like the idea of an IEP, individualized education plan, where you're figuring out what the child needs, what works for them, and then tailoring it to them.
I think it also can really help with burnout and feelings of empathy and tenderness toward someone when we understand where they're coming from. And I'll give a really strange example. In my case study, the woman was introduced to computers, and she's in her late 50s now. So computers were a really new idea, and she was a child. And what they wheeled a computer in on a cart, and this is like pre-internet everything. And the first thing she did when she was allowed access to the computer, and she was, maybe 10, 11 years old, was to tear apart the keyboard, which meant she said she overheard one of the staff saying, "I told you they're retarded. They can't handle something like this." And she just broke, like, what, their expensive computer. And of course, she had no way to type and no way to speak. But what she was doing, she had seen the alphabet and ABC order on because she's in school in special ed, and they have the alphabet up all over the classroom. And she has all these visual challenges, and the keyboard was in what's called QWERTY. So it was completely out of order for her. And she was trying to fix it. Like, if you could imagine seeing a jumble of blocks and you wanted to try to put the blocks in some kind of sequence so that you could play with them or work with them. And she had no way to explain her behavior or what she was doing. So they took it away from her for a long time. She also tried to get speech as a child, and children have magical thinking, and this crosses all cultures and types of people. So uh, she, as a little girl, thought maybe if she ate the pages from books, that was how speech came out of people. So she's tearing up books and eating the pages. So what do? They take away her books. So just think about this. They're taking away a keyboard. They're taking away books. And this is someone who's highly intelligent but cannot speak. The other thing I think is really important for context here is that for some people with autism, sensory issues are so overwhelming and so traumatic that they disassociate, they disembody. This was kind of actually a shock to me because, uh, for example, with the case study, um, this person, when they explained what it was like the first time they spoke out loud for meaning, uh, they just suddenly could hear vibrations That's what they referred to words as. They said they could hear vibrations that matched their thoughts. They didn't know where it was coming from. And then they figured out it was the Julie entity, this thing she heard about all the time. But she didn't associate herself with it at all. She was out here in her consciousness because of all the trauma and sensory flooding. And when she heard about this, she began to very slowly connect that somehow thinking could be manifested in sound through this entity. Nobody else could do it, just her. And again, it's a kid trying to figure all this out with no way to communicate or ask for help or clarity. And for the longest time, she thought speech came out of nostrils. So you can imagine, how is someone supposed to be doing speech therapy without, say, a communication device like an iPad with the camera on, with the speech therapist and the client looking into the screen so they can accurately hear and see? Um, they have to rearrange wording for it to even be acceptable. Nobody should touch them. Um, if they're using a keyboard, all the letters are out of order. I mean, it just goes on and on. And once I think people begin to understand all these points and breakdown, it's it's just immediate that you can begin to solve the problems and have big breakthroughs. And the other thing, and I just want to say one more thing, a lot of people who struggle with speech are constantly putting objects in their mouth. And that is actually super important for being able to get the skill of speaking for meaning. Because when you have all this sensory trauma and you're disassociating and disembodied, putting objects in your mouth makes you have tactile feelings in your mouth and your tongue and your teeth and your lips. And I'm always saying to people who are nonverbal, uh, I'm so glad that you are using putting objects in your mouth. And people say, but they've got to stop that. It's awful, and they've got to make eye contact. Well, do you want the person to communicate, or do you want them to make eye contact?
Yeah.
So you feel better.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that you feel better.
Yeah.
But we don't think of it that way, and it's at least for me, it was very humbling to suddenly go, and I thought I knew everything, and when I had actually met the woman I did the case study with at a symposium, and it was for non-verbal people, non-speaking for meaning people. Many of them could type, but they couldn't speak. And when I started to understand who she was, because I thought at first she was a neurotypical parent with a kid with autism attending this symposium. When I began to understand who she was, I couldn't, every night I'm at her hotel room going, can we talk some more? And I start to hear all the signs of behaviors like that. If someone stays in the room, if they're circling around you, if they smell you, this is all social engagement. If they're putting objects in their mouth, they're trying to find where their mouth is. If they're using echolalia, they are trying to get any kind of sound that is specific out, even though it's babble and doesn't involve a pointed request or an answer for a question. That all of this is about trying to gain speech. If they're watching a television, watching a video without subtitles, they're watching it over and over again because they need to take visual breaks to hear, and they're getting fragments. So that's why they're watching. It's not necessarily OCD. They're just trying to get the whole story. But if they have subtitles with a video, they start to have a lot more complete understanding of all the dialogue and everything going on visually, and being able to follow everything without having to compartmentalize and flip back and forth. So I'm seeing all this and realizing all this, and I'm suddenly realizing that here's this mom attender who ought to be like the lead speaker at this conference, that I'm around several hundred people who are, I can clearly now see, are all in stages of attempting to communicate, to socialize, to speak for meaning. And I'm thinking, I've kind of like patted myself on the back as being a bit of an expert about autism. And I'm thinking, if I've been missing all this, what else am I missing?
Yeah. Yeah. And learning that these kids and these parents are really trying to reach through that door, but don't know how to. Did anybody else have any other questions before we're ready to go? These
I think Lenore has a question in the chat.
Oh, Lenore.
I do. When you were talking about the client who was tearing apart the computer keyboard to put the alphabet in the correct order, do they make keyboards? Can you get a keyboard that's in the ABC format instead of QWERTY?
Yes, it is possible, and it can be a very helpful thing for transitioning. A QWERTY keyboard is important because it's the standard, and you know, uh, there are all kinds of situations where a person might really need to be able to handle it eventually. But it's a wonderful way to transition and have better results with typing. Um, and you can go online and put in ABC, like on Google, ABC keyboard, and they'll start to pop up with products, and they're pretty reasonable. Like they're not crazy expensive, and there's a way you can have a keyboard plugged into, say, a computer or a smart tablet. So they're definitely available. I did want to do one more thing before we go, which is to talk just briefly about my website, because there's a lot of material there. And I've put in the chat the website um, and YouTube and Tumblr, because the website gives a real brief kind of introduction and overview with all kinds of things you can click on and then go to like big bodies of information. I also have a YouTube channel which has all or nearly all of the interviews that I did for my case study. And then from either YouTube or the website, you can go to Tumblr, and there are transcripts with notes and commentary about the interview and really significant things in bold. So you can skim if you don't have real time to watch 39 videos. Um, but the main thing is that all of these are free and open to the public. And my real goal here is to be able to empower people and bring hope and possibilities to families and caregivers, and hopefully even inform how research is done. And that's because we tend to anthropomorphize, um, and that means Temple Grandin, who is a well-known person on the autism spectrum, uh, Temple Grandin writes about anthropomorphizing animals in her book, Animals in Translation, and how it affects scientific research. Because we give animals human attributes, and sometimes it's us projecting our own human feelings or emotional attachments in places where it really doesn't sync up. And in the quote unquote normal or neurotypical world, a lot of neurotypical people presume things about people with autism that are incorrect. And some of the examples I gave were today, like um, saying someone's retarded because they tore apart a keyboard and that
Can't speak.
and can't speak or explain their actions.
Seeing it through a neurotypical lens.
Right. And that informs a lot of research. I do want to also take one more moment, which just bear with me. I'm going to be off camera for a second. I'm going to grab that book and read briefly to you how someone, if they didn't have any filters on, this is someone who has speech, started out typing and has speech. I've annotated their book with notes and commentary on the TLC Autism website. And this will show you how even high functioning people may be thinking or using language when it's on their terms. So I'll be right back. Just grabbing the book.
I really hope this helps a lot of parents out, because even with a speaking, high functioning child, this helps me as a parent understand a lot of what might be going on for my daughter, and how her brain works differently. But that's just, I love all this information. Sarah is just so helpful.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm just looking here. This is the book. Yeah, I'm got to get it in focus.
Oh, there we go.
Reflections of Self.
Yes, and it's by a woman named uh, Sandra Williams. And I'm going to see if I can just quickly. I didn't know if she had an index back here, but I'm going to. You can see I've marked up the book with every kind of post-it. So
I would just like to comment that if you study different languages, even if you study European languages, and there's different word orders for saying things, and the grammatical structures are different. And then if you go to, for example, Asian or Arabic languages, it's even much more different. So it's not an indication of somebody having a disorder to put language in a different order.
That's a really good point.
well, here's a great quote. And you can already start to hear the word order creeping in. And she's trying really hard not to use it in general so that her book will relate to the public. Much of my school years are fogged memories because of the mass confusion of it all. I felt as if I were from another culture and had no beginning grasp of this foreign land that I was made to participate in. And to that point, many people with autism are as astonished and mystified by neurotypicals and their logic and their reasons for doing things as other people. And I just found it. Here's an example of my unique dialect describing my experience as a presenter at an event for educators. And I probably won't read the whole thing, but I'll read a few sentences of it. And I'll read it as slow as I can, because as you start to hear it, you'll probably be able to pick up the gist of it. But this is actually very reassuring for someone who's starting out and facilitating typing with someone, because if they start to type or speak in this type of a word order, you couldn't dream it up in your wildest dreams. Many to say, never to herded words that are like the way I to be speak. But those who take the time to listen to the thinking of the words, they too learned to know the real of me. Another things is often I to be to forget, I to be talking to a large group of peoples, and often become rapid in my words and or monotoned because I to be so much into my scripts, they memorize scripts, that I do it mechanically. I to not be aware, I to be do this, and be to get of stuck in this at times speaking ever so fast and not giving people time to hear it. And then it goes on. But imagine this is their go-to for thinking and speaking, and they're trying to write a book to explain about autism to neurotypical people. There's going to be stuff that's lost in translation. or misunderstood, or neurotypicals are going to say something like, "Oh, they're such a great poet." It's like, well, yes, because their whole way of speaking is poetic, and they might just be saying something kind of in their own language, and
Mhm.
that's why they're so drawn to poetry, to try to express what's going on with them to neurotypicals.
Mhm.
Every time I talk to you, I learn something new. So I am so grateful for Miss Sarah for all the stuff she has been sharing. I am so absolutely grateful for everyone that came. Does anybody have any final questions, comments, ideas, anything before we sign off?
Just thank you so much for the work that you do. And it's so needed and there's so little of it. Don't ever stop. Yeah, that's your marching orders.
Well, and I would like to also say that having you assist a parent with their child individually, because a lot of this is very, even though there is cultural stuff, like there is a lot of stuff that you might be able to help the parents brainstorm about what might be working for them and what might not be. And I think that getting a hold of you would be super helpful for a lot of parents that are just, or caregivers that are struggling. And I think that you are such a valuable resource.
Thank you. Yeah, well, it's the information is there, and we just have to find ways to share it and get it out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful.
And some
Beautiful.
experts just give a lot of theory, but parents need to know how to apply it. And I feel like you're so good at explaining how to apply it.
And it's not up here, it's down where it's so
Hmm.
practical. And I love that about you.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Once you have the context, a lot of things just start to spontaneously unfold.
Absolutely.